No one plays more music. KSMO, Salem.
It is 70 degrees at 1 o'clock, and this check of the time and temperature brought to you by Doug Wisdom of Wisdom Financial Services, who is pleased to announce that he has joined Emeritus. Emeritus is a mutual organization that always puts the customer first, and fulfilling life is what they do each and every day. They've established a tradition of delivering products and services generation after generation so that all of their clients can enjoy a high quality of life. They measure their success by how many people they've helped and by how many promises they've kept. And that is the true measure of who they are. When lives are fulfilled, their mission's fulfilled. Call Doug Wisdom today at 729-7508. Doug is located right above us here in the Wisdom Building at 802B South Main. Securities and investment advisory services are offered solely through Emeritus Investment Corporation, member FINRA SIPC. This is the last Wednesday of the month, and that means that we have Dr. Kyle Oustz with us. And Kyle can't be in the studio today, but we have him on the phone. Kyle, are you with us this morning and this afternoon?
Right with you. Yes, yes, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing great. We've got a lot of things that we need to go over, but first we want to let you get your location out there and how folks can get a hold of you.
Okay. Yeah, we're still down where they've been for 50 years now at 403 North Henderson, down there, not far from the police station library right there on the old downtown part. We have got lots of remodeling and repainting and all that kind of things on, roof on, and things happen on the inside. So there's construction going on, but we're still running pretty fast and trying to keep things going. But right down there, and the phone number if you want to call down there is 729-6100.
6100. Well, you know, Dr. Kyle, we've dealt with a little bit of hot weather over the last couple of weeks, and we're cooling down now. But summer is right around the corner. You know, Memorial Day is kind of considered the unofficial start of summer. That means we're going to have a lot of heat to deal with before too awfully long on a steady basis, and heat and outdoor humidity is not very good for our little critters that we have running around, is it?
Absolutely, and there's different risk levels for different animals, but some of them certainly can be in a high-risk category, and there's a number of factors that sort of contribute to that, and things that will kind of help to predict when your problems are going to happen and how to prevent them. First off, I guess cats actually are pretty good about not having as much heat trouble as dogs. Cats are pretty sedentary. When it gets hot, they'll just go into the shed somewhere. They'll go hide in a shaded area somewhere and just kind of sit there and let the heat go by. Dogs tend to be more active, and they often are in the sunshine more, and they're often also less likely just to crawl off in somewhere and just wait. They also sometimes are confined more. Cats tend to run loose and find their own place, where dogs may be confined in a yard that may not have an area with good shade, or a place they can dig a deep hole in the yard to kind of get somewhere where it's cooler. So they sometimes have their area they're in is not quite as easy to find a place that's real shaded or can find a cool place. Some other things that make a big difference. Certainly the outside conditions matter, and the hotter it gets, obviously, the more dangerous it is. At the same time, two other things need to be thrown in there too. Is humidity matters, not as much because it makes it hotter per se, but a dog cools itself by panting, and when panting happens, evaporation creates cooling, and when it's real humid, evaporation doesn't occur very much, and so they can't cool themselves as well. The other thing that makes a difference is air and the movement of air. When it's windy, it feels cooler, and when it's real still, it feels hotter. And just that air moves heat around and kind of gets things off of animals when they're outside, have that wind blowing.
Well, I'm kind of like the cat. I start finding dark spots, better known as shade, and some nice cool water.
Yep. And also the ones that are inside, they do the same thing. The ones that are outside have a little different situation with them. They can't click on the AC and just and hang out and watch TV. But that certainly is is a different too. Indoor animals not as bad about it. Although there's a little bit of accommodation that happens to a certain point. The animals that live outside all the time, they can't accommodate too much, but a little bit when they live out there, all the time. Indoor ones are not quite as accommodated because they're usually in a cooler temperature time. A few things that also make a difference. A dog's age, not in itself makes a difference, but as function is a little bit impaired as they get older. Their the energy it takes to pant sometimes is harder for one to generate. And as far as the ability to just move off heat, it's sometimes harder when they get older. They're a little bit slower. Everything metabolically moves slower, so it's a little bit slower to get things cooled off sometimes. They also may sleep deeper sometimes, and so they may sleep in the hot sun and get overheated sometimes, not realizing that it's gotten so hot when they're deep asleep. So that can make some difference too. Certainly, the amount of time they're exposed makes a big difference. And if one's exposed for a couple of minutes, they can take about anything. But when if they're out there for half a day and the sun swings around on that side of the house isn't shaded, then you can really get into a problem.
Right, Dr. Kyle. Let's talk about something else that is oftentimes a problem with pets, and probably more so with dogs than cats. But exercise is an important part for not only us but for our animals. And a lot of times, folks will put a dog on a leash and head out to either maybe the high school track or out on the sidewalks, out on the streets. And we've got shoes on to protect our feet, but those animals don't.
Yeah, and there's variation in dogs in how much exposure they've had to hard surfaces over the past several weeks. They will get a thicker callus on their pads that take it better if they're outdoors a lot. If they're on carpet and on soft grass all the time, that callus is thinner, and they'll actually feel that heat. And they don't like walking on really hot asphalt or concrete if their pad's thinner. Let's say the dogs are on it all the time. It's thicker, and they'll still feel it, but it doesn't bother them as much because that pad, that cornified epithelium, that gets kind of almost like a pad, or it gets pretty thick, and they'll do better with it.
So it's probably a better idea during the hot weather, if you can, to stay on maybe trails or on grassy areas.
Yep, can be good. And two things to keep in mind too is that when it gets good and hot, we actually cool by sweating, and cats don't sweat much at all, and dogs sweat only very little, and their sweating is mostly on their feet. They have a few sweat glands that are on their ears and face, but not much, and so they don't really depend on that to cool themselves. They cool by panting. And if they, if it's not as efficient quite as having your whole body sweat and that moisture everywhere, and it just cools better because you have a entire area of moisture evaporation to cool yourself. But dogs and cats don't have that. The other big thing that is different in them and us is that one way we cool ourselves is we go get a big glass of ice water. But many times, especially outdoor dogs, when they go to drink water, that water is the same temperature as the outside, so it does not cool them from the inside out. So there are things you can do to help that part. I know some people will keep just like a little bucket in the freezer, and they'll throw some little soda bottles full of water in those things and freeze them. And then in the morning they'll on a real hot day they'll drop it in the dog's water bowl outside. And as long as the dog won't chew it, as long as the dog doesn't mess with it, they'll just leave it alone. It'll cool that water, so they drink cooler water all day. So that's a way to kind of help keep it a little bit cooler. And they just don't have any ice cold water like we drink to cool ourselves, because that's a major cooling way for us, but they just don't get that benefit.
Right. And I would suppose that the amount of water required by each dog by body size is kind of important too, right?
Yes, and the hotter it gets, the more they need, because the more they pant, they blow that moisture off, in evaporation, so they use more of it. So they need to have more of it available when it's real hot.
Is there a general guideline to go by as far as how much water?
What I usually go by is I'll whatever container they have, I'll watch the emptying rate, and if it empties at a certain rate, in the fall when it's cooler and early spring when it's warm, I'll figure on just about doubling that when it's really hot. So if they're drinking, half a gallon a day, I'll give them a gallon when it's hot, or if it's when it's cool weather, a gallon, then I give them 2 gallons if it's a big, or a set of dogs, if it's a few dogs together. So I just kind of double it when it gets really hot versus when it's cool.
Is there a problem with too much water, or are they going to sort of regulate that themselves?
Rarely is there a problem with too much water. Most dogs will stop when they're ready. No, there are very few times, unless there's some kind of health condition that they've got, which is pretty rare. Most times they'll regulate their water intake, and they're only not overdo it.
Right. Now, if your dog or cat is showing some signs of distress with the heat, what are some steps to take? Probably need to get in and see you.
Yeah, there's a few things. The first sign you look for is there's panting, but then there's also I call it aggravated panting, where they're just panting almost excessively, where it's really frantic almost. That's the first sign where they're truly getting overheated. Next thing you'll see usually is they'll almost get staggery. They'll get almost, the dog looks almost like he's drunk. And they're just when they're getting really, really hot, and then they'll go down, and then they'll start to get real brick red, and that's when it gets into a dangerous phase. And the body can actually handle being quite warm for very short periods, but just not for very long. And the hotter they get, the less time they can be there before they establish kidney damage, brain swelling, some vascular damage, and something like that start to misfunction when it gets that too hot. So the big thing is when they get too hot is cool them down. When I used to train bird dogs, and I would start at daybreak when it was real cool, but when they got later in the morning and they got hot, I'd run by and ease the dog up and just drop them into a water trough where the cattle drink, and just let them get good and wet, and then put them back in the kennel and just kept them a lot cooler when they're going back into the kennel. But it's just keeping them cool pretty quickly, and that's what, when I bring in overheated, to the clinic, that's the first thing I do is to try to cool them down and get their body core temperature back, right at 100, and then that's which is normal for a dog. About 101 is normal. Just get them cooled back down.
Right.
And then we manage the signs that occur, afterwards. Try to manage the, whatever damage occurs. It is normal after they get overheated to have trouble regulating temperature for a day or two after that. They get chilled and they get hot again, and that's normal after that. Their temperature regulation gets out of whack when they get too hot.
So it's very important once they get home to receive proper care too.
Yeah, just to kind of make sure they're staying okay and stay in a pretty mild environment for a while.
Right. What are some of the cases that you're dealing with now at the clinic? I guess
we are still seeing lots of ticks, and they're just loaded up on all over the place. So we're seeing a lot of that, and that's this time of year that's always like that. We are also had a number of heartworm cases come in the last 2 weeks, so we've had those come in also, and so it's mosquitoes about to come out, so you gotta get your heartworm stuff going and get your stuff set up for the spring and summer. So seeing quite a bit of that. That's our biggest thing. Vaccines are still going pretty heavy, and we've had some hit by car dogs and kind of those things happen all through the year. But ticks and fleas have been fleas are starting up, but ticks have been bad for now over a month. But they're getting warm and everything's happening faster. We've seen some bad cases of stomach worms too, that probably were there all winter, but now the weather's warmer, they're surviving much better. And those stomach worms are doing really, really well in the dirt and in the outside environment. So they're piling up in the dogs pretty quickly. And so it's seeing some of those. And the worst worms you don't see in the stools. You never do see those in the poop, the bad worms.
Oh, okay. If a person does have some issues or think they may have some issues going on with their pets, do you need to make an appointment, or can you just come down and say, hey, I've got this going on?
Yeah. Appointments really help because we know how to work it in. We know what staff to set aside. We know how much time to give you. We do save a little time for emergency walk-ins, but then we have to do a lot of shuffling and trying to get people moved and people shuffled around, and we're trying to move people around too much if we can help it as far as appointments that are already there. So appointment really helps, but we do try to keep some slots open for things that happen that aren't planned, to get a look at them. We leave one spot in the morning and one spot in the evening to kind of cover some of those things that aren't planned, that are emergency type things.
Right. And another question I wanted to ask you, because I see a lot of posts on Facebook about emergency vet services. Do you offer that?
Mm-hmm. We're doing daytime emergency services. We're not doing night and weekend stuff at this point. Now, that's at some point we may come in. A couple of reasons. One is where I live out on my farm. There's near toward Boss. There's no cell service, so I can't find messages sometimes, and
Right.
I can't get into that service even very good. Either every now and then I can get it decent, but most of the time it just buffers all the time.
Right.
So it's not I don't have a dependable way to get information. And now we've adopted the two little boys. We got to spend some time with them too.
Right.
I do know that Raw does some. I don't know their situation very well, and there's some. I know some of the bigger communities around have some emergency clinics that do things around it. But I haven't gotten familiar with everybody yet because I'm just still tuned to the area to know what else happening everywhere. But
Yeah. Now, do you offer grooming down at the clinic as well?
there's not grooming per se at the clinic. We have personal staff that does groom, but we're not doing per se grooming at the clinic. And I don't know if one day we ever had that set up. We may, but I'm not sure at this point. But I don't have it set up at this minute.
Okay. And for someone that wants to get more information, do you have a Facebook page or a website?
Sure do. Yeah, the Dent County Veterinary Clinic is a Facebook page, and then we try to keep it pretty updated. And then just say 729-6100 is the phone number, and we do board animals too. We do that pretty commonly. We're upgrading our boarding facilities now, and then we're getting our treatment areas almost complete now, so it'll be ready to start and have our main core work area set up, and that'll be nice to have that running.
Okay.
And blood chemistry machines are in, and the X-ray machines are in, and laser machines in. So a lot of the machinery is up and running. So just trying to keep all the cases lined up.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you had started boarding now.
Yeah, we do. We have some boarding facilities. Sure enough, we got room for around up to about 10 right now. So we'll have probably a little bit more later, but we have that available now.
Oh, okay. And they can arrange that by calling the same number, I would assume.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good service because a lot of times, vacation, especially vacation coming up before too awfully long for a lot of folks.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to cover while we have you on the phone?
I think that's our main stuff. We'll just check in here in a few weeks and do it again.
Okay. Let's give you number one more time.
Okay. Yep. That's area code 573-729-6100.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. We do look forward to talking to you again the last Wednesday of June. Will that work for you?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
See you then.
All right. All right. Dr. Kyle Oustz from the Dent County Veterinary